Okay, so we've got our 3D printer and my little workstation here. I've got the thumb drive out of my 3D printer, or sorry, out of my computer. I'm going to put that into the 3D printer now. And the 3D printer will automatically sort of pick up that there is a USB drive in there once we hit this button that says build. So I get the build button and I have the option to select the USB drive. Here it's the one in the middle. And then all the stuff that is on that USB drive is going to be listed there. We can cycle through that list and choose what it is that we want to build. And so in our case, we are looking for the FlexiBot. And so I see the FlexiBot right there. Now, before I hit build right here, we need to be aware that there has to be a build plate in here before we can 3D print. And the build plate is actually this piece of glass right here. And what you'll notice is that my piece of glass is a little bit foggy. And this is because there's an old layer of glue on this build plate. And we're using just a glue stick like this. So it's okay to use the build plate repeatedly and just keep adding a new layer of glue each time that you do a print for a while, like maybe 4 or 5 prints or something like that. But once the layer of glue starts to get kind of thick, you definitely want to take this build plate to the sink, run some hot water on it, and wash off the glue and start with a new clean build plate. So again, the easiest way to get rid of the glue, you'll see it's purple right now. Once it dries, it will get kind of clear looking. When it's time to clean this build plate, we just take it to the sink, run hot water on it, and use this scraper to scrape all of the old glue off. It's totally okay for the glue to go down the sink. It is water soluble, but it's probably actually better to just go ahead and get it in the garbage. So now my build plate is ready. I've got glue on here everywhere that I think that the image is going to be printed. So we slide our build plate into the back like that. And then in the front there are 2 clips here and here. We just push down and those 2 clips will snap our build plate into place. Don't forget to put the cap back on the glue. So what I see right now is it's telling me that the nozzle is getting hot and the build plate is getting hot. And if I was to touch that build plate, it is really warm. It's probably not hot enough to burn me, but probably something you want to avoid touching is the piece underneath this glass, or even the glass now that it's been put on there. Definitely don't want to touch up in here where the tip is, because that's going to get to about 500 degrees. So safety, be careful when you're messing with the 3D printer. Really try to only touch the build plate, or in the case that you are changing filament. Over here on the end, you can see my roll of filament is in there that I just put in. And the other piece that's important to remember when you change filament, be sure to put this retainer on. Otherwise, your roll of filament will probably fall out and go rolling down the classroom. So there we go. Our build plate is warming up. Our nozzle is warming up. There's a bunch of options here. The option that I want is I want to click the build option. And so it's pulling the file off of the thumb drive right now. It's copying the file. And now that it has the file, it's going to go ahead and run through a process of kind of a self-diagnostic. It's going to try to figure out, hey, is the build plate level? If the build plate is not level, we can adjust it with this roller right here and this roller right here. But it's going to do a test to see if the build plate is level, which will take it just a moment. I'm going to pause while it does its test. And so it's just finishing its test to see if the build plate is level. It is also preheating, it says here, so that, again, the nozzle is getting very hot to about 500 degrees Fahrenheit, and the build plate is getting at least warm. Again, the build plate probably won't burn you, but the nozzle definitely would. And right now it's going to take it a while to get to the temperature it needs to get to. It's going to get to 250 degrees Celsius for the nozzle and 80 degrees Celsius for the build plate. So I'm going to wait for both of these to be filled up, and then it will start the print after everything is preheated. So it is just about done preheating. We are at 248 degrees on the nozzle, and it's preheated now. You can see the build plate is coming up. Looks like some of our filament leaked out a little bit, so I'm going to pull that away. That has not happened to me before, so it's a unique case this time. But we can see now that, I'm going to turn this light up so we lose the glare. But we can see now that the nozzle is kind of running around the build plate. And what it's actually going to do, it's going to drop a perimeter around the outside of our build. And what that does is it helps with this thing called build plate adhesion. It helps the actual image that will be printed inside this perimeter to stick to the build plate better. And so this is a great time to talk about failed prints. And so a print fails if we don't have good build plate adhesion, which means that it comes unstuck from the build plate, because then the 3D printer is just trying to build on something that's not there anymore because it slid out of the way. And so it's important to make sure that we have the glue down on our build plate, because that helps with build plate adhesion. And it's also important to make sure that we have identified the correct filament for the print that we are doing, because the printer will change some settings internally based on the kind of filament that's being used. So back to our build really quick. You can see kind of down in there. Let me open this for you. I would leave this closed during the build, but there is our perimeter, and it's going to finish that up and start actually building our little roboto here in just a minute. I'm going to go ahead and pause for now. Close this. As I mentioned, having both the top and the front closed is a good idea during the build, just so our build doesn't get disturbed and so no one gets burned. And we'll be back to take a look at our robot sort of as the process goes on.